Good morning. This is my first Pension Research Council conference, and I'm so excited to be here. So thank you to Olivia for inviting us. I also want to thank Olivia for writing a wonderful blurb for our book, Reimagining Social Security. And if you're interested, you're welcome to pick up a copy. There isn't enough for everyone, but if you are really interested, I hope you'll grab one. What we're going to do this morning is present our paper, Social Security's Role in the Federal Debt Explosion, and connect it to some of the broader frameworks in our book, Reimagining Social Security. Eva will join me in the middle of this to present some novel scores that we've been able to produce with the Social Security model. Let me start with one aspect of Social Security that's often misunderstood. It is often framed as a future problem. We worry about the 2032 trust fund exhaustion, and that's pretty much what the debate in Washington is centered on. What a lot of people miss is that Social Security has been running cash flow deficits since 2010, and we estimate that between 2010 and 2032, the Treasury will have to borrow roughly $4 trillion in order to pay out full benefits. So my point here is that this is not just a trust fund future problem, but we actually have a current cash flow problem, and Social Security is already adding to the debt. Over the long term, those projections get much, much worse. Looking at the financial report of the United States government, Social Security's unfunded obligations over the 75-year long term in today's net present value terms are more than $25 trillion. If you account for what we also have to repay for the trust fund, you're looking at roughly $28 trillion. Again, this is not a future cliff. This is a growing fiscal challenge. And this is also not just a demographic story. This is another common misconception about Social Security. It is true, Americans are living longer, they're having fewer babies, and that does contribute to rising costs, but that's only part of the story. And I would argue not the most important part. As we show in our paper, a lot of the imbalance comes down to program design choices. They're truly central to why costs are rising and why the system is becoming increasingly unsustainable. Yes, the worker to beneficiary ratio has fallen significantly over time. That's a big demographic driver. But here are three policy choices that are doing much of the work that are often overlooked. First, Social Security is an earnings-related benefit. As such, it pays higher benefits to higher earners. Because it is largely designed to replace earnings, not necessarily fight poverty. That also means that a large share of Social Security benefits flow to middle and upper income retirees. Second, initial benefits are wage indexed. So as wages grow, each new cohort of retirees receives higher adjusted benefits than the one before it. So basically, Social Security is getting more expensive, and future retirees receive higher benefits. Third, we've effectively expanded the number of people, the number of years that people receive benefits because we haven't adjusted eligibility ages to reflect increasing life expectancies. These are all policy choices that can be reversed. Put together, this means that benefits grow faster, last longer, and extend well beyond basic poverty protection. With that, I want to highlight that Social Security spending problem is not just an inevitable consequence of aging, it is largely the result of policy choices. In our book, Reimagining Social Security, we review a number of countries that have reformed their pension programs previously. Most OECD countries had to do so much earlier than the United States because their populations were aging much sooner than ours. And what are some of the reforms that they adopted? They slowed benefit growth. They better aligned benefits with need. They adjusted retirement ages to reflect longer lifespans, and in many cases introduced automatic stabilizers, such as, for example, indexing eligibility ages to longevity. And we draw lessons for the United States from those countries. One way to look at this, especially with the looming trust fund insolvency, is what happens if we don't act. Under current law, when a trust fund is exhausted in 2032, benefits would be cut by about 25%, depending on whose estimates you're looking at. And these cuts could apply across the board. Even in that scenario, their impact would not be equal because Social Security represents a relatively small share of wealth for higher income households, but a much larger share for lower wealth households. As you see in this chart, the bottom 25% of wealth holders, Social Security makes up almost half of their entire lifetime wealth. It only makes up 8% for the top 10% of wealth holders. That means that delay is not neutral, and automatic benefit cuts would not be neutral either. They threaten to harm the most vulnerable the most. The CBO has estimated how these different groups would be affected if automatic benefit cuts would take effect. And for the bottom 50% of wealth holders, they would see overall lifetime net wealth reduction of more than 10%. For the top 1%, it is a rounding error. They would barely notice it. With that, I want to turn to Eva to walk us through some novel scores.
Thank you. So policymakers sometimes point to stronger economic growth as a way to address Social Security's financing challenges without resorting to structural benefit and tax reforms. To test whether economic growth alone is actually sufficient to fix Social Security, we ran two alternative real wage growth scenarios in Cato's Social Security model. One is 0.5 percentage point higher than the baseline, and another is 1 percentage point higher. And as you can see on this chart, under no scenario would Social Security stop running cash flow deficits. And even under the most optimistic real wage growth scenario we tested, Social Security would add to federal debt each year over the next 75 years. This is partially because what Romina already mentioned, that Social Security benefits are wage indexed, which means that higher real wage growth, yes, it increases the program's benefits, but it also increases future benefit obligations, which offset some of those revenue gains. We also tested the effects of higher inflation on the program's finances, and as you can see, the yellow and black lines, these higher inflation lines are barely distinguishable from the baseline, and this slight improvement we see in the cash flows is because of the timing of inflation and how it affects the program. So it increases taxable payroll immediately, but the resulting cost of living adjustments come with approximately a 1-year lag. So that's why we see a slight improvement there. We also tested the potential stagflation episode, which becomes more and more likely if post-insolvency gaps, Social Security are covered fully by borrowing. And we basically replicated the 70s stagflation scenario and applied that to the 2032 to 2041 period. And as you can see, it would, such an episode significantly worsen the program's finances and would add roughly $3 trillion more in those 10 years to federal debt than is already projected under the baseline. Moving on, we tested several reform options, starting with transitioning Social Security from its current earnings-related design to a flat anti-poverty benefit. This reform would be phased in between 2029 and 2036. And as you can see from 2042, the program would start running cash flow surpluses, the surpluses which would grow over time. As an example from, by the end of the projection period, by 2099, Social Security would record 6.6% taxable, 6.6% of taxable payroll surplus compared to 5% projected in the baseline. And this growing surplus would eventually actually allow to reduce the payroll tax. Could you go to the other side of the podium? All right. it would actually it would actually allow reducing the payroll tax and reducing the burden on future generations of workers while maintaining this anti-poverty role of Social Security. That said, significant savings can be achieved by maintaining the current earnings-related structure, by slowing the growth of benefits. Here we model two combined reforms, which is price indexing of initial benefits and using a more accurate inflation adjustment for cost of living adjustments. This change CPI, and both of those reforms would be implemented in 2029, and Social Security would again start running cash flow surpluses by 2050. The program spending would decrease from 5.7% of GDP in baseline in 2055 to 3.8%, and from 6.2% in baseline in 2099 to 1.7%. We also tested the effects of raising eligibility ages. Here we model raising each eligibility ages by 3 years each in 2029, and then indexing them to life expectancy. As you can see, this reform alone would not result or would not eliminate Social Security's cash flow deficits, but it would result in significant improvement in the program's finances. And most importantly, it would align with this life expectancy link. So it would align Social Security to longevity trends continuously. This is a practice that has been adopted by 25% of OECD nations, this life expectancy link. And lastly, we modeled 3 revenue-raising options. First is increasing the payroll tax to 17.6%, which is the minimum necessary to achieve 75-year solvency based on Cato's Social Security model. And as you can see, it would result in significant surpluses, gradually move to deficits, but eventually return to surpluses again by the end of the projection period. The other 2 options we tested is taxing fringe benefits like employer-provided health insurance and eliminating the taxable maximum. Here we would credit additional benefits for those additional earnings that are taxed. And as you can see, fringe benefits would actually, taxing fringe benefits would actually be a stronger change in terms of the effect on the program's finances. And as an example, the deficit would shrink from 5% in the baseline in 2099 to 3.6%. With that, I'll hand it back to Romina.
Thank you, Eva.
Yep.
I'll take it.
Yep.
Thank you. Can you take your laptop? Thank you. Okay, I just want to close with a few thoughts and calls to action. First, we'll be continuing this conversation in Washington, D.C. next week, Wednesday at noon. If you're in D.C., I invite you to join us. There will also be free lunch after where you can debate the topic further, or you can join us online. I'm very excited for this event. Second, Cato ran 2 polls this year, one in August and one in December, and on the topic of how do we actually overcome the political obstacles to reform, we identified that 71% of Americans in our poll support an independent fiscal commission to tackle Social Security and fix the broader debt issue. I've been advocating for a fiscal commission modeled after the base realignment and closure process with independent experts. It could be many of us in this room to make some of the tough decisions that Congress keeps avoiding. Third, I encourage you to sign up for our Substack, the Debt Dispatch. It's a great way to stay engaged with us. It is widely read among members of Congress, and we also accept guest posts. So if you have something that you want to get in front of decision makers, I welcome you to send that to me. Just email me. And Andrew Biggs, who's here, has published a series with us about common misunderstandings about Social Security and what's driving the imbalance. And lastly, Cato has developed its own Social Security model. It scores based on the Social Security trustees' projections, and we're also currently implementing dynamic elements so we can score things that look closer to what CBO might output. It is open source. It lives on GitHub, and if you'd like to be connected with our modeler and gain access to the model, or if you have proposals that you would like us to score, we would welcome you reaching out. You can either email me at rboccia@cato.org, or we have a separate email address, socialsecurity@cato.org. Thank you.